"You call this an emergency? Sit down and wait like everyone else." Margaret Hensley's voice cut through the EA lobby like a gavel of indifference aimed at Marcus Carter as his pregnant wife bled in his arms. What she didn't know was that the woman about to walk through those sliding doors was Mayor Vanessa Langley, who had come not for pleasantries but to dismantle the quiet cruelty that had thrived here for decades. The wipers thrashed against the windshield, smearing rain instead of clearing it. The storm was fierce, but not as fierce as Marcus Carter's pounding heartbeat. His right hand gripped the steering wheel so hard that the tendons in his forearm burned. His left hand clutched the trembling fingers of his wife Alana, whose breaths came in shallow gasps. Marcus ... Her voice was weak, but there was fear in it. She squeezed his hand. Something's wrong. He tried to mask the panic surging through him, but his eyes betrayed him in the rearview mirror. "We're almost there, baby. Hold on for me." The green sign ahead glowed faintly in the rain-smeared darkness. St. Matthew's Medical Center? Emergency entrance? Marcus pressed the accelerator, tires hissing over the slick asphalt. His mind reeled. They had done everything right. Prenatal checkups, vitamins, regular monitoring. But tonight, something had shifted. Alana had woken up with searing pain in her abdomen and blood staining the sheets. He had called 911, but the storm had flooded the main highway, delaying ambulances. So he had thrown on his jacket, carried Alana to the car, and sped through the night like his life depended on it. Because it did. They pulled up under the harsh fluorescent canopy of the EA entrance. Marcus leapt out, yanking open Alana's door and easing her into his arms. She was lighter than he remembered, or maybe adrenaline was making her weight vanish. The automatic glass doors slid open with a mechanical sigh, revealing a waiting area half full of patients. Behind the front desk sat a woman in her late 50s with an immaculately styled silver bob and a pale, pink cardigan over her uniform. Her name tag read, "Margaret Hensley, Administrator." Marcus rushed to the counter, voice ragged. "My wife, she's pregnant, she's bleeding, she needs help right now." Margaret's eyes flicked from him to Alana, then back. Her mouth formed a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, we're currently short-staffed due to the storm. You'll need to take a seat, and we'll call you when we can." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "She's in labor, and something's wrong." Margaret typed slowly into her computer. "I understand you're concerned, but we have protocols. We have to triage patients based on urgency. You'll be called when it's your turn." Alana moaned in his arms. Her head sagged against his chest. "This is urgent," Marcus snapped. "She's bleeding." The administrator's voice hardened. "Sir, I've explained the situation. Take a seat." Something about the way she said "sir" landed like a slap, clipped, dismissive, tinged with something unspoken but unmistakable. Marcus scanned the waiting area. A man holding his stomach groaned softly in one corner. A teenager with a bandaged wrist sat scrolling on his phone. A pale woman with a sprained ankle had already been wheeled into the back. He turned back to Margaret, lowering his voice to a dangerous calm. "If you don't get someone now, my wife and my baby could die." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Sir, threats will not get you seen faster. Security can escort you out if necessary." Marcus's pulse roared in his ears. This wasn't just bureaucracy, this was stonewalling. And he knew, deep in his gut, it had everything to do with the color of their skin. Before he could respond, a young nurse appeared from the hallway, her scrubs wrinkled, hair escaping its bun. She looked at Alana and froze. "What's going on here?" "This man is refusing to wait his turn," Margaret said, eyes still on her monitor. The nurse's eyes narrowed. "She's hemorrhaging. Get her to room 3 now." 2 orderlies appeared with a gurney, and Marcus gently lowered Alana onto it. As they wheeled her away, Margaret's voice trailed after them. "We all have to follow procedure." Marcus followed, his chest burning with fury. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. Machines beeped in distant rooms. A doctor in green scrubs rushed in, barking orders. BP is dropping. Prep for emergency C-section if needed. Marcus was ushered to the corner, feeling like the room was closing in on him. Alana's eyes locked on his. "Stay with me," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. A flurry of activity surrounded her. 4 lines, monitors, rapid assessments. Marcus's hands shook. This could have been avoided. Minutes, precious minutes, had been lost arguing with a woman whose job was supposed to be getting people help. The nurse glanced at Marcus. "You need to file a complaint about what happened at intake." Marcus's voice was low, steady. "Oh, I will." Half an hour later, Alana was stabilized, though the baby's heart rate was still being monitored closely. Marcus stepped into the hallway, his muscles trembling from the adrenaline crash. He spotted Margaret at the front desk again, sipping from a dainty floral mug. She looked up, her lips curling faintly. "I hope your wife is all right, sir." It took every ounce of control not to leap across the counter. Instead, Marcus leaned forward, voice like steel. "You delayed my wife's care, and you put 2 lives at risk. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did." Margaret's expression didn't falter. "Feel free to speak to hospital administration, but I followed protocol." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Your protocol is going to get someone killed." As he turned away, he felt the weight of her gaze on his back, cold, indifferent, and entirely certain she would face no consequences. But Marcus had already decided this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When he stepped back into Alana's room, her breathing was steadier. She reached for his hand. "She didn't believe us, did she?" Alana's voice was quiet, almost resigned. "No," Marcus said. "But she's going to wish she had." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Marcus felt a different kind of storm building, one that would not pass quietly. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by morning, but the air outside St. Matthew's still felt heavy with last night's storm. Inside room 3, the fluorescent light buzzed faintly above the bed where Alana lay resting, and 4 lying, trailing from her arm. Marcus sat by her side, his chair angled so he could keep one eye on her and one on the doorway. He'd barely slept. The adrenaline that had kept him upright through the night had curdled into something else, a sharp, unyielding resolve. The heart monitor beside Alana beeped steadily, but he could still remember the moments when it had faltered. He could still hear the panic in the nurse's voice when she'd called for backup. He could still see the image burned into his mind. Margaret Hensley, leaning back in her chair, telling him to take a seat. Alana stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She found his hand and squeezed it gently. "You didn't sleep." "I couldn't," Marcus admitted. Her gaze softened, but there was a heaviness in it. "You have to let it go, Marcus. Stress isn't going to help me or the baby." Marcus shook his head. "Let it go? She could have killed you." She looked at us like we didn't matter, like your life wasn't worth the urgency. "I'm not letting that slide." Alana studied him for a moment, then sighed. "I know. But if you push too hard, you know how these things go. They'll close ranks. They'll make it about your tone instead of her actions." Marcus had heard it before, the subtle ways institutions shifted the focus from what was done to how someone reacted. He'd seen black men like himself turn from victims into aggressors in the blink of an eye, simply for raising their voices. "I'm going to be careful," he said, "but I'm not backing down." Later that morning, when the obstetrician came in for rounds, Marcus saw his opening. "Doctor, can I ask you something?" Marcus said, standing. "Of course," the doctor replied, flipping through Alana's chart. "When we came in last night, the administrator at the front desk made us wait. She said the EA was short-staffed. But Alana was bleeding, and you said that's a medical emergency. How does that happen?" The doctor hesitated, eyes flicking briefly toward the hallway. "I can't speak to the intake process. I wasn't there. But any signs of hemorrhage in a pregnant patient should be addressed immediately. No exceptions." Marcus's jaw tightened. So if she'd been brought back sooner... "I can't speculate," the doctor said quickly, but there was something in his tone, a hint that he didn't disagree. What matters now is that she's stable. Focus on that. It was the polite dodge Marcus had expected, but it only made him more determined. At the nurse's station, Marcus spotted the young nurse from the night before, the one who'd actually stepped in. Her name tag read Nina Lopez. She looked up and offered a small, tired smile. "Hey," she said. "How's your wife doing?" "Better," Marcus said. "Thanks to you." Nina shook her head. "I just did my job." "That's the thing," Marcus said, leaning on the counter. "You did your job." "She didn't, and I need to make sure someone hears about it." Nina glanced around, lowering her voice. "You're not the first to have a problem with her. Margaret, she's been here forever, knows the system inside and out. If you file a complaint, it'll get buried unless you have proof." "I have my word," Marcus said. "I believe you," Nina replied. "But they'll want something they can't ignore, witnesses, documentation. And even then, the hospital board protects its own." Marcus's mind churned. He didn't just need to be heard, he needed to make it impossible for them not to act. By midday, he was sitting in the small family lounge, laptop open, drafting an email to the hospital's patient advocacy office. He wrote every detail he could remember, the exact words Margaret had used, the time they arrived, the visible state Alana had been in. He saved it, but he didn't hit send. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Marcus?" The voice on the other end was warm but surprised. "Hey, Rob, I need a favor." Rob Henderson had been Marcus's college roommate. Now he was an investigative reporter for the City Chronicle, a local paper that had recently been running stories about racial disparities in healthcare. Marcus laid out what happened. Rob listened without interrupting, then said, "That's bad, really bad. But if we run something, we'll need confirmation from inside. Can you get anyone to talk?" "I think I can," Marcus said, thinking of Nia. "Good. And Marcus, if you go public, this won't just be about Margaret. It could shake up the whole hospital." "That's the idea." That night, as the rain returned and the hospital corridors emptied, Marcus found himself standing outside the administrator's office wing. The frosted glass door to patient services was locked, but through the pane he could see Margaret's office light still on. Inside, she sat at her desk, sipping from her floral mug, typing leisurely. The sight made something twist in Marcus's gut, the casual comfort of someone who believed she was untouchable. Margaret glanced up and noticed him in the hallway. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then she offered that same brittle smile from the night before. She raised her mug in a mock toast before turning back to her computer. Marcus walked away, fists clenched. The next morning, Marcus brought Nina coffee during her break. "I need your help," he said plainly. She hesitated. "If I speak up, I could lose my job." "I get that. But if she does this to someone else, the next family might not be as lucky. I'm not asking you to go public. Just confirm what you saw to someone who can hold her accountable." Nina studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we have to be careful." By the time Alana was discharged 3 days later, Marcus had a folder full of notes, timestamps, and corroboration from Nina. Rob had agreed to meet him at a diner near the hospital the following week. Marcus wheeled Alana out into the chilly morning air. She was pale, but there was strength in her grip on his arm. "You're really going to do this?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus said, "because if I don't, she'll keep doing it. And one day someone's going to die." Margaret didn't know it yet, but her world was about to get smaller. The diner was the kind of place where the coffee was always hot, but never great, where the cracked vinyl booths had been repaired with duct tape, and the waitresses called you Hun, whether they'd known you for 5 minutes or 5 years. Marcus slid into a booth near the back, his leather jacket damp from the misty air outside. Across from him sat Rob Henderson, dressed in jeans and a well-worn blazer, his laptop already open, a small recorder resting beside it. "All right," Rob said, leaning forward. "Walk me through it, step by step." Marcus told the story again, this time with the precision of someone laying down evidence in court. The times, the words, The way Margaret had leaned back and told him to take a seat while Alana bled in his arms. Rob typed as he listened, occasionally glancing up. "And you have a nurse who can back this up?" "Yes, Nina Lopez. She saw Alana, realized it was an emergency, and got her into a room right away." Rob's brow furrowed. "You realize if she talks, she's risking her career." "I know. That's why we're keeping her out of it until we absolutely have to." Rob nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll start digging. I've been hearing whispers about complaints against this hospital for a while, particularly in the EA. Could be this opens a bigger story." Marcus felt a flicker of vindication. "Good, because this isn't just about us. If she's done this before, she'll do it again." 2 days later, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Rob. "We need to talk, ASAP." They met again, this time in Marcus's living room. Rob dropped his bag on the coffee table and pulled out his laptop. "I pulled public records on St. Matthew's," he said. "Over the last 3 years, there have been 14 official complaints to the State Health Board about intake delays in the EI. Marcus's stomach tightened. 14? "Yep. And get this, in 9 of those cases, the patients were Black or Latino. In 4 cases, the patients died within 24 hours of admission." Marcus gripped the edge of the coffee table. "Jesus," Rob kept going. "Most of those complaints? They went nowhere. Insufficient evidence or within procedural limits. But one name keeps popping up, Margaret Hensley." Marcus's chest burned with anger. "She's been doing this for years." "Looks like it," Rob said. "But if we're going to make this stick, we need someone high up to talk. Someone in administration." That night, Marcus called Nina. "Do you know anyone in admin who might be willing to speak off the record?" There was a long pause on the line. "Maybe," she said finally. "There's a guy named Dr. Patel. He's in charge of quality assurance. He's been frustrated for a while about how complaints get buried, but he's careful. You'd have to approach him right." The next day, Marcus found Dr. Patel in the hospital cafeteria, sipping tea alone at a corner table. He was in his early 50s, with tired eyes and the kind of posture that suggested he carried too much weight on his shoulders. "Dr. Patel?" Marcus said quietly. "I'm Marcus Carter. My wife, Alana, was here last week." Patel's gaze sharpened slightly. "Yes, I remember. I need to talk to you about what happened when we came in." "About Margaret Hensley." Patel's lips thinned. "Be careful what you're asking, Mr. Carter. I'm asking why my wife almost died in your A while an administrator told me to sit down." Patel glanced around before leaning in. "There are problems. Long-standing ones. But speaking openly could cost me my position." "I understand," Marcus said, "but people are getting hurt. Someone has to say something." Patel studied him for a moment, then lowered his voice further. "There's a meeting tomorrow morning. Department heads. I'll raise the issue discreetly. But if you want change, you'll need more than my word." The following morning, Marcus wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that meeting. But as he paced in the hospital lobby, he saw the department heads file into a glass-walled conference room on the 2nd floor. Through the frosted lower panels, he could see shadows moving, hear the muffled thrum of voices. A few minutes later, the door opened, and voices grew sharper. Marcus froze as he caught a fragment. "We can't keep defending her, Jim. The optics alone." Another voice, unmistakably Margaret's, cut in. "Optics? I followed protocol. If people can't handle the weight, that's their problem." Marcus's fists clenched. The door shut again, and the voices were swallowed by the walls. That afternoon, Rob called with another update. "I've been digging into Margaret's personnel file. Officially, she's spotless, commendations, employee of the month twice. But I talked to a former nurse who left 2 years ago. She says Margaret was known for making judgment calls about which patients were really urgent, and those calls always seem to lean the same way." Marcus exhaled slowly. "We need to bring this to someone who can't ignore it." Rob hesitated. "Like who?" Marcus thought of the one person who might have both the power and the motive to act. "The mayor." Rob raised an eyebrow. "That's a big jump." She's a black woman who campaigned on fixing racial disparities in healthcare, Marcus said. If she hears about this, she'll have to act. 2 days later, Marcus stood outside City Hall, a manila envelope in his hand. Inside were copies of the complaints Rob had uncovered, notes from his conversation with Nina, and his own written account. When he finally got into the mayor's office, her aide, a brisk young man in a tailored suit, took the envelope. "The mayor will review this," he said. "She needs to see it now," Marcus insisted. "This isn't politics, this is life and death." The aide gave him a polite but dismissive smile. "We'll be in touch." That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Alana. "I don't know if she'll even read it," he admitted. "She will," Alana said softly. "You've lit the fuse. Now we see where it leads." What Marcus didn't know was that the fuse was already burning faster than he imagined. The mayor's aide had handed the envelope directly to her that evening, and by morning she was on the phone with the hospital board. And Margaret Hensley was about to have the most unwelcome surprise of her career. The morning began quietly at St. Matthew's Medical Center. The rain had stopped, leaving the city streets slick and glistening under a pale sun. Inside the EI lobby, the hum of fluorescent lights and the muted chatter of patients filled the air. Margaret Hensley sat at her station, floral mug in hand, fingers tapping across the keyboard with leisurely precision. It was just after 10, and when the glass doors slid open and a tall, commanding figure stepped inside. Mayor Vanessa Langley didn't wait for anyone to announce her. She strode in wearing a charcoal gray pantsuit, her natural curls pulled back into a neat bun, a gold pin of the city seal fastened at her lapel. Every step radiated purpose. Behind her came 2 aides, one carrying a leather portfolio, the other holding a tablet. They didn't look around. They didn't need to. The mayor's presence was enough to shift the air in the room. Margaret glanced up, her polite front already in place. "Good morning, Mayor Langley." "We weren't expecting." "That's the point," the mayor said, cutting her off. Her voice was calm, but there was steel under it. "Where is your hospital director?" Margaret's practiced smile faltered. "I'm not sure if Mr. Kendricks is—" "I didn't ask if you were sure," the mayor interrupted. "I asked where he is." A few heads in the waiting room turned. The aides exchanged quick glances, sensing the tension building like static before a storm. "I'll call his office," Margaret said, reaching for the phone. The mayor stepped closer to the counter. "While you do that, I need to ask you something, Miss Hensley." Margaret stiffened. "Yes, ma'am?" "Why did Marcus Carter's wife wait in your lobby while she was hemorrhaging?" The color drained from Margaret's face, though her voice remained clipped. "I followed protocol. Our triage system prioritizes based on—" "Don't," the mayor said sharply. "Don't give me the script. I've read the reports. 14 complaints in 3 years about delays in your intake process, most involving patients of color. Do you know how many people have died in that time?" Margaret's mouth opened, then closed again. The mayor didn't wait for an answer. She turned to one of her aides. "Get the hospital board chair on the line, now." By the time the hospital director, Thomas Kendricks, arrived, the scene in the lobby had shifted from awkward to electric. Patients were whispering to each other. A couple of nurses lingered in the hallway, pretending to review charts while trying to overhear. "Mayor Langley," Kendricks said, stepping forward with a hand extended. He was a stocky man in his 60s with thinning gray hair and a suit that looked a size too tight. "This is unexpected. How can we help you today?" "You can start by explaining why your intake procedures are killing people," the mayor replied, ignoring his hand. Kendricks blinked. Excuse me?" "Don't pretend you don't know," the mayor said, her voice carrying across the room. "I have documented complaints, eyewitness accounts, and internal statements indicating that critical patients, disproportionately Black and Latino, are being delayed at the front desk, including a woman who nearly died here last week because your administrator decided to make her wait." Kendricks glanced nervously at Margaret, who looked like she was trying to shrink into her chair without actually moving. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my office?" "No," the mayor said. "We'll discuss it here." in front of your staff and your patients. Because this isn't just a personnel issue, it's a public trust issue. Margaret's voice finally broke through, brittle and defensive. With all due respect, Mayor Langley, you're making assumptions. I've worked here for 23 years. I know how to do my job. Do you? The mayor asked, stepping right up to the counter. Because your job is to make sure people in medical crisis get help immediately. Not to make them sit in pain or bleeding while you decide they don't look urgent enough. How many more complaints do you think it will take before the state shuts this AA down? Margaret's cheeks flushed. The mayor didn't give her the chance to finish. Here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation, and I will personally be recommending that the state review your license. Gasps rippled through the waiting area. Kendrick stammered. Mayor, with respect, you don't have the authority to. You're right, the mayor said. I can't fire her, but I can make damn sure this city stops sending funding your way until this hospital can prove it treats all patients equally. At that moment, the glass doors opened again, and Marcus walked in. He froze when he saw the mayor standing in front of Margaret's desk, the tension thick enough to cut. The mayor spotted him instantly. Mr. Carter. Perfect timing. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes locking on Margaret. She looked away first. Would you be willing to tell the hospital director exactly what happened the night you brought your wife in? The mayor asked. Marcus glanced at Kendricks, then back at the mayor. Gladly. And he did, every detail, every word, exactly as it had happened. The silence in the room deepened with each sentence, until the only sound was the hum of the lights overhead. When he finished, the mayor turned to Kendricks. You have a problem here, a dangerous one. Fix it. The meeting that followed in Kendricks's office was tense. Margaret wasn't there. She'd been escorted out by HR, but the mayor, Kendricks, Marcus, and 2 board members sat around a polished table, while Rob Henderson, invited by the mayor herself, recorded every word. We will be conducting a full internal review, Kendricks said, his voice tight. No, the mayor replied. You'll be bringing in an external investigator, someone independent, and the findings will be made public, Kendricks hesitated. That could damage the hospital's reputation. The damage, the mayor said, was done the moment you allowed systemic bias to go unchecked in your emergency department. This is your chance to prove you actually care about fixing it. When the meeting ended, Marcus stepped out into the hallway with the mayor. You didn't have to do this in person, he said quietly. Yes, I did, the mayor replied. Some fights you can't win from behind a desk. She glanced at him. You've done more than most people would, but it's not over. Once the investigation starts, you'll need to be ready. They'll try to discredit you. I'm ready, Marcus said. The mayor gave a small nod. Good, because I intend to see this through. Back in the EA lobby, the mood was different. Nurses smiled faintly at Marcus as he passed. Patients murmured to each other. And behind the now unmanned front desk, the floral mug that Margaret had always kept close was gone. For the first time since that night, Marcus felt like something had shifted. Not enough, not yet, but in the right direction. But outside the hospital, parked half a block down the street, a black sedan idled. Inside, a man in a suit watched the entrance through tinted windows, phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, he said quietly. She's making moves. We might have a problem. The press conference happened 3 days later, and St. Matthew's Medical Center hadn't looked this nervous in years. The hospital board, under the mayor's insistence, had agreed to an independent review of intake procedures, but only after what insiders called a heated negotiation behind closed doors. Marcus stood at the back of the crowded lobby-turned-media room, camera flashes bouncing off the polished tile. At the podium, Mayor Langley outlined the investigation's scope. All A cases from the last 5 years, all complaints and all staff interviews from security guards to top administrators. The people of this city deserve to know, the mayor said, her voice steady and resonant, that when they walk into an emergency room, their life will be valued equally, without exception, without bias, without delay. Her words drew scattered applause, but Marcus noticed something else. A cluster of administrators near the side doors, whispering with tight expressions. One of them glanced directly at him, then turned away quickly. Outside, after the conference broke up, Rob Henderson caught up with him. "They're already circling the wagons," Rob said, nodding toward the group of administrators, slipping into an elevator. "I've been hearing from sources inside. Some of the board members think Margaret is being unfairly targeted." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Unfairly targeted? She made my wife wait while she bled." "Yeah," Rob said, "but to them she's an institution. 20-plus years in the job. She knows where all the skeletons are. That makes her dangerous both to them and for them." The first real blow came the next day. Nina Lopez found Marcus in the hospital cafeteria, her eyes darting around nervously, before she slid into the seat across from him. "They're coming after me," she whispered. "What?" "I got called into HR this morning. They said they're reviewing my conduct the night you came in, implying I bypassed triage without authorization." Marcus felt a surge of anger. "They're trying to make you the problem." Nina nodded grimly. "They want to make me look like I broke rules so they can claim Margaret was right." Marcus leaned forward. "You're not alone in this. I'll make sure the mayor hears about it." But the pushback didn't stop there. That evening, Marcus's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was male, smooth, and just a little too casual. "This is Leonard Drake. I represent certain interests connected to St. Matthew's. I think we can make this situation go away." Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. "Go away how?" "A settlement," Drake said. "A generous one. Enough to ensure your family is taken care of. And in return, you drop the public accusations. No more interviews. No more meetings with the mayor. Just let this fade." Marcus's voice dropped to ice. "Tell your interests they can keep their money. We're not for sale." There was a brief pause. "You might want to reconsider," Drake said, the friendliness draining from his tone. "Things can get complicated if you keep pushing." Marcus hung up. By the end of the week, the investigation team, a mix of legal experts and patient advocacy specialists, set up an office on the hospital's second floor. Their arrival stirred tension like a sudden gust of wind in a crowded room. Staff avoided eye contact in the hallways. Conversations stopped when investigators walked by. Marcus was called in for his first formal interview on Monday morning. The lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Dana Keene, asked precise, deliberate questions. "Tell me exactly what you saw in the waiting room," she said, pen poised over her notebook. Marcus recounted it again. The storm, Alana's bleeding, Margaret's dismissive tone, the exact wording. Dana didn't interrupt except to ask for clarification. When he finished, she set her pen down. "Mr. Carter, I have to warn you. If we find a pattern, it's not just Margaret's career on the line. It could implicate the hospital leadership." "Good," Marcus said. "Then maybe they'll finally change." Meanwhile, the hospital's PR machine was spinning hard. A press release went out describing Margaret as a dedicated employee with an exemplary service record and warning against rushing to judgment before all facts are known. On the local news that night, a former patient praised Margaret for always being professional and fair. The segment made Marcus's stomach turn. "They're laying groundwork," Rob said over the phone. "If this goes public, they'll try to make it he said, she said. That's why we need to dig deeper before they do." The deeper they dug, the worse it got. 2 weeks into the investigation, Rob uncovered a complaint from just 6 months earlier. A black man named David Kinsey had come into the EA with severe chest pain. Margaret had kept him waiting nearly an hour. He died in the hallway as nurses rushed to resuscitate him. The official report blamed unforeseen cardiac arrest. When Marcus read it, his hand shook. "And nothing happened to her?" Rob shook his head. "Nothing that stuck. The family didn't have the resources to fight it." That night, Marcus sat with Alana at their kitchen table. She was in her 3rd trimester now, the swell of her belly visible under her loose sweater. "Marcus," she said softly. What if this drags on for months? What if it hurts your job, our savings? Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. If I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life knowing she could do it again to someone else's wife. I can't live with that. Alana studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then we fight. The following morning, the hospital board held a closed-door session. Marcus wasn't invited, but someone leaked part of the discussion to the press. According to the leak, 2 board members wanted to reinstate Margaret immediately, claiming the investigation was politically motivated. The mayor responded by calling an emergency meeting with the board and inviting Marcus to attend. When he walked into the boardroom, the tension was suffocating. One of the board members, a man with slicked back hair and an expensive watch, leaned back in his chair. Mr. Carter, we sympathize with your experience, but you need to understand the damage you're doing to this hospital's reputation. Marcus looked him dead in the eye. The damage was done when this hospital let people die in its waiting room. By the end of the meeting, no decision had been made, but the lines were drawn. The investigation would continue, and so would the quiet war between those who wanted truth and those who wanted it buried. And somewhere in the city, Margaret Hensley was making her own plans. Late that night, a text came to Marcus's phone from an unknown number. Careful who you trust. Not all your allies are on your side. Marcus stared at it, the weight of the warning settling in. Because if that was true, the fight ahead was going to be even more dangerous than he thought. The morning after the anonymous text, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. It wasn't paranoia, at least not entirely. It was the sense that every move he made, every meeting he attended, was somehow making its way back to the people trying to protect Margaret. By mid-morning, his suspicion turned into certainty. Rob called, his voice sharp with frustration. We've got a problem. I just got word from one of my sources in the investigation team. Transcripts from your interview have been leaked. Marcus's pulse quickened. Leaked to who? To the hospital's internal legal team. And they're using it to prepare a counter-narrative before the investigation's even finished. Marcus gripped the edge of the counter. Someone in the investigation office is feeding them. Yeah, Rob said grimly. And we need to find out who before they twist this into your word against theirs. That afternoon, Marcus met with Dana Keene, the lead investigator, in a quiet conference room on the 2nd floor. I need to ask you something straight, Marcus said. Who in your office has access to the interview transcripts? Dana folded her hands. Myself, my 2 deputies, and the administrative coordinator. Why? Because someone leaked mine to the hospital. Her jaw tightened. That's a serious allegation. It's not an allegation. It's a fact. They quoted things I said in that room. Word for word. Dana's eyes narrowed. All right, I'll look into it. But I need you to understand something. If they've planted someone on this team, they're not just trying to protect Margaret. They're trying to undermine the entire investigation. That night, as Marcus walked to his car in the hospital parking lot after visiting Alana for a routine checkup, a shadow detached itself from between 2 parked vehicles. It was Leonard Drake, the man who'd called with the settlement offer. Mr. Carter, Drake said, smiling faintly. Still making trouble, I see. Marcus stopped in his tracks. You following me now? Drake shrugged. I prefer to think of it as keeping an eye on the situation. You're poking at a structure that's been in place for decades. People get nervous when the foundation starts to crack. I'm not afraid of your threats, Marcus said. Drake's smile thinned. You should be, because not everyone who says they're on your side actually is. And when this blows up, you'll be the one standing alone in the blast zone. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low. If that's supposed to scare me, it's not working. But it tells me one thing. You're scared. And you should be. Drake held his gaze for a moment, then turned and walked away, his shoes clicking against the wet pavement. The next day, Dana called Marcus into her office. We've identified the leak, she said without preamble. Marcus sat down. Who? One of my deputies. She's been in contact with the hospital's legal team for weeks. She claimed she was consulting on procedural matters, but the emails show she was passing along interview notes and summaries. Marcus clenched his fists. So they've been one step ahead the whole time. Not anymore, Dana said. She's off the team, and the rest of us are tightening controls. But this means they knew what we were looking for before we even started asking questions. Later that week, Rob broke another piece of news. I found something you need to see, he said, sliding a manila folder across the table in their usual diner booth. Inside were copies of internal memos from the hospital, marked confidential. One, dated 3 years ago, described an informal intake discretion policy, allowing senior administrators to override triage nurses if they felt a patient's case did not appear emergent. That's not medical judgment, Marcus said. That's profiling. Rob nodded. And Margaret was one of the few people with override authority. Marcus leaned back in his seat. We've got her. Not yet, Rob cautioned. We need a smoking gun, proof she used that authority to deliberately delay critical patients. And if she's been doing it for years, there's someone else who saw it happen. Marcus thought of Nina. He called her that evening, explaining what they'd found. If you can tell the investigators about this override policy, and that Margaret used it the night we came in, it could blow this open. There was a long silence. Then Nina said, I'll do it. But once I do, I can't work here anymore. Marcus's voice softened. I'll make sure you're not alone in this. Whatever happens. When Nina gave her statement, it was as if a dam had cracked. Within days, 2 more nurses came forward, each with their own stories, patients in crisis being told to wait, Margaret's dismissive comments, the unspoken hierarchy that determined whose emergencies counted and whose didn't. Dana's team moved fast, cross-referencing patient records, complaint histories, and staff schedules. And then they found it, a case from just 8 months earlier. A Latina mother had come in with symptoms of a stroke. Margaret marked her as non-urgent based on her presentation, delaying treatment by nearly 2 hours. The woman survived, but with permanent paralysis on one side. The paperwork showed Margaret had personally overridden the nurse's urgent classification. This is it, Dana said, dropping the file onto the table in front of Marcus and Rob. This is the pattern, and this is the proof. Marcus stared at the file. So what happens now? Now, Dana said, we take it to the board. And when they see this, they'll have no choice but to act. But Marcus knew better than to believe it would be that easy. Because in a system that had protected Margaret for over 2 decades, truth wasn't enough. It would take pressure, public, unrelenting pressure, to force their hand. And he was ready to bring it. The boardroom at St. Matthew's was built to impress. A long polished oak table stretched from one end to the other, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The chairs were heavy leather, the kind that swallowed you if you sat back too far. A portrait of the hospital's founder, stern, pale-eyed, unsmiling, watched over the room like a silent overseer. Marcus sat halfway down the table, flanked by Mayor Langley on his right and Rob Henderson on his left. Across from them, the hospital board members filed in one by one, murmuring to each other as they took their seats. At the head of the table sat Thomas Kendricks, the hospital director, his expression tight. At exactly 9 a.m., Dana Keene entered, a thick folder in her hands. She placed it in the center of the table, her gaze sweeping the room. We have concluded the initial phase of the independent investigation, Dana began. What we have found is not only disturbing, it is indefensible. She slid copies of a summary report down the table. Pages rustled as board members flipped through them. Marcus didn't look at his copy. He already knew what it contained. Dana continued, 14 formal complaints over 3 years alleging delays in emergency intake. 9 of those involved patients of color. In multiple instances, the delay directly contributed to worsened outcomes, including 1 fatality. In at least 3 cases, the delays were the result of discretionary overrides by one administrator, Ms. Margaret Hensley. A low murmur rippled through the room. One board member, a silver-haired woman in a tailored navy suit, leaned forward. Are you saying she intentionally delayed patients based on race? Dana's tone didn't waver. We are saying the pattern strongly supports a bias in her decision-making. Whether conscious or unconscious, the result was the same: disproportionate harm to patients of color. At that moment the doors opened, and Margaret herself walked in. Her presence was like a cold draft. She wore a crisp cream blazer, pearl earrings, and an expression that was equal parts defiance and disdain. I see you started without me, she said, sliding into an empty chair at the far end of the table. I was told I'd have the opportunity to respond to these accusations. This is not a trial, Miss Hensley, Kendrick said. This is an evidence review. Then I'll review the evidence, Margaret said, flipping open the summary report. Her eyes scanned the first page, and a smirk tugged at her lips. Interesting. Half of these so-called complaints are from people who didn't even understand how triage works. Dana's voice was steady. One of those people was a man whose wife you made wait while she was bleeding heavily from a pregnancy complication. Margaret looked directly at Marcus. Yes, I remember you. You came in acting like you were the only person in the building. Others were waiting too. Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp. My wife could have died because you decided she didn't look urgent enough. That's not triage. That's judgment. And it's wrong. Margaret didn't flinch. I followed the rules. Dana tapped a page in the report. No, Miss Hensley, you overrode them. In at least 3 cases, you downgraded a nurse's urgent classification to non-urgent without a medical basis. In one case, the patient suffered permanent paralysis. In another, the patient died. Margaret's jaw tightened. Those decisions were based on my years of experience. Sometimes nurses overreact. Sometimes, the mayor interrupted, her voice cutting through like a blade, bias masquerades as experience. The room went quiet. The mayor's gaze didn't leave Margaret's. You've been protected here for over 2 decades, Miss Hensley, but protection ends when it costs lives. A board member cleared his throat. Let's remember we're here to decide next steps. The evidence speaks for itself. We can't ignore this. Another board member, a man with slicked back hair, the same one who challenged Marcus in the last meeting, leaned back in his chair. Or we can remember that this hospital's reputation is at stake. Publicizing this could destroy trust. Marcus turned to him. You think trust is built by hiding the truth? People already don't trust this hospital. I've heard it in my community for years. You fix that by cleaning house, not sweeping things under the rug. The argument grew heated, voices overlapping. Some board members pushed for termination. Others urged a measured approach, which Marcus recognized as code for inaction. Margaret sat back, her arms folded, watching the division like a cat watching trapped birds. Finally, Dana spoke over the noise. Here is my recommendation. Suspend Miss Hensley pending completion of the full investigation, bar her from all intake-related duties, and refer the findings to the State Medical Board for review. The mayor nodded. I support that. Kendricks looked around the table. All in favor? Hands went up. Not all, but enough. All opposed? Margaret's defenders raised theirs. The motion carries, Kendricks said. Effective immediately, Miss Hensley is suspended. Margaret stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're making a mistake. You think this will solve your problems, but you have no idea how deep they go. She gathered her bag, pausing at the door to glance at Marcus. You think you've won, Mr. Carter, but this isn't over. Then she was gone. After the meeting, Marcus stepped into the hallway with Rob and the mayor. She's not bluffing, Rob said quietly. If she's been here that long, she probably has dirt on half the people running this place. The mayor nodded. That's why we keep pushing. People like her don't go quietly. They dig in. But we've got the public on our side now. That matters. Later that evening, Marcus returned home to Alana. She was resting on the couch, the glow of the television casting soft light across her face. How'd it go? She asked. She's suspended, Marcus said. Alana smiled faintly. That's a start. Yeah, Marcus said, sinking onto the couch beside her. But she's not done fighting. And neither are we. 2 days later, Rob sent Marcus a link. It was an online article from a local news site, an exclusive interview with Margaret. In it, she claimed she was the victim of a political witch hunt, that she had always treated every patient equally, and that her suspension was a personal vendetta by a biased mayor and an angry husband who didn't understand hospital procedure. The article ended with a quote from Margaret, "The truth will come out, and when it does, the people trying to ruin me will regret it." Marcus read it twice, feeling the familiar burn of anger in his chest. Then he looked at Ilana, who was watching him carefully. "They're going to try to flip this," Marcus said. "Turn me into the villain. Then make sure you tell the story louder than they do," Ilana replied. That night, Marcus called Rob. "It's time to take this public. All of it. The override policy, the cases, the names. No more holding back." Rob hesitated for only a second. "If we do this, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," Marcus said. "I want the truth out there." The next morning, Marcus sat down for a recorded interview with Rob's newspaper. The camera rolled as he recounted everything. Not just what happened to Ilana, but what he'd learned since. The bias, the policies, the human cost. When the interview ended, Rob leaned back. "Once this runs, she'll come after you harder, but she won't be able to hide any more," Marcus nodded. "Good, let her come." But as Marcus left the newsroom, he noticed a black sedan parked across the street, the same one from weeks ago, the same tinted windows. It pulled away slowly as he approached, disappearing into the midday traffic. And Marcus knew the fight was about to get even uglier. The article hit the City Chronicle website at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. By 8 a.m., it was everywhere. Marcus's face, tense but determined, sat beside the headline. "Whose emergency counts? ER administrators' bias under fire after years of delays, harm, and deaths." The piece didn't just tell his and Ilana's story. It laid out the pattern, the override policy, the case files, the statistics. It included interviews with Nina and the 2 other nurses who had come forward, their names withheld for protection. It even had quotes from grieving family members of past victims. By noon, the hospital's front entrance was flanked by protesters. Hand-painted signs read, "Patients first, no exceptions. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Justice for every life." News vans lined the street. Reporters jostled for position, microphones thrust toward anyone in scrubs who stepped outside. Inside, the atmosphere was toxic. Administrators rushed between meetings, their voices clipped and tense. The board had called an emergency session for that afternoon, but the damage to the hospital's image was already spilling across social media like wildfire. Marcus stood just outside the EI lobby, watching the protests through the glass. Mayor Langley arrived shortly after, flanked by 2 aides. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable, until they stepped aside from the crowd. "You've set the match to the fuse," she said. "They're finally listening," Marcus replied. "They are," the mayor agreed. "But Margaret isn't the type to go quietly. If she has anything she thinks she can use, she'll use it now." The warning proved accurate. That evening, Margaret appeared on a local news broadcast, flanked by her attorney. She looked calm, almost smug, as she declared herself the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by political rivals and activists with an agenda. Then she played her card. Margaret's attorney held up a stack of papers. "These are performance reports showing Ms. Hensley consistently exceeded expectations in patient throughput, reduced EA wait times, and received commendations for efficiency." Marcus, watching from his living room, felt the blood drain from his face as Margaret leaned toward the camera. "I've dedicated my life to this hospital," she said. "I've never treated anyone differently because of their race, but I will not stand by while my name is dragged through the mud by people who don't understand what it takes to run an emergency department." By the next morning, the backlash had begun. Online comment sections filled with defenders accusing Marcus of trying to ruin a good woman's career. Anonymous messages started hitting his email, some calling him a hero, others calling him far worse. Alana found him at the kitchen table, scrolling through the flood of responses. "You can't read all of that," she said gently. "I need to know what they're saying," Marcus replied. "No, you need to remember why you started this," Alana said, taking his hand. "Not for them, for the people she hurt." That afternoon, the hospital board meeting began with heightened security. 2 uniformed officers stood at the doors. The room was packed. Board members, lawyers, media representatives, and a handful of community leaders, including the mayor. Dana Keene presented the final report. It was damning, more so than the preliminary findings. In addition to the 3 override cases already known, investigators had uncovered 7 more where Margaret had downgraded urgent classifications, each time against the nurse's recommendation. 5 of those patients were people of color. 2 had died. The room was silent when Dana finished. Kendricks cleared his throat. "Given these findings, I move that we terminate Miss Hensley's employment effective immediately and refer this matter to the State Medical Board for further action." A board member raised a hand. "And if she sues?" "Then we fight," Kendricks said. The vote was taken. This time it wasn't close. Margaret Hensley was fired. She didn't take it quietly. When the decision was announced, Margaret stood, her eyes blazing. "You think this is justice?" "This is politics, pure and simple. I will sue every single one of you for defamation." Then she turned her gaze to Marcus. "And you've made an enemy you'll regret having." Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch. "The only regret I have is that it took this long." Security escorted her out. The door shut behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through the room. The fallout was immediate. The hospital announced a full overhaul of its intake procedures, mandatory bias training for all staff, and the creation of an external oversight committee that would include community representatives. Mayor Langley addressed the press outside with Marcus at her side. "This is not the end," the mayor said. "This is the beginning of rebuilding trust between this hospital and the people it serves. Mr. Carter's courage made this possible. But it will take all of us to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." That night, Marcus and Alana sat together on the couch, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. "You did it," Alana said softly. "We did it," Marcus corrected. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. The baby kicked, a small but powerful reminder of what was at stake from the start. The next morning, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "It's not over. Some systems don't change just because you cut off one head." Marcus stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message. Because for now, at least, one head had rolled, and the system knew someone was watching, and he intended to keep watching.